Okay, can we all do this? How are we doing? Now you know what this means. Well, it means three things. First of all, it's from Star Trek, right? It's from Mr. Spock, live long and prosper. That's true. Now in Vulcan, the teenagers don't do this. The teenagers are sort of casual. They go, prosper, dude. That's right. Now, where did Leonard Nimoy get this? Leonard Nimoy himself introduced us to Star Trek. Where did he get it? From the synagogue. Leonard Nimoy belonged to the same synagogue as my Uncle Boris. Is that cool? Okay, yeah. And on Yom Kippur, in the most holy day, a member of the priestly caste called a Kohen, anyone whose last name is Cohen is a member of the priestly caste usually, has to make this sign in front of the Torah, in front of the Bible. Okay, so that's where it came in. Now, it turns out the relationship of Star Trek and Judaism is very close. Not only is this true, and not only is Leonard Nimoy Jewish and William Shatner is Jewish, Spock is Jewish. I have data on this. Spock's father is Vulcan, right? Who is his mother? Earth, from Boston, from a nice Jewish family. And in Judaism, it passes down through the mom. It's matriarchal. Spock is Jewish. And my daughter, who is also Jewish, says that for her, Star Trek is Jews in space. Third thing about this is my own hypothesis, and this I think is statistical and not absolute. People who have an easy time doing this most likely have played the piano. That's where you get, it's not absolute, okay? I played the piano, so there you go. And that's probably also the only thing you'll remember from the talk. I know you have the handout ready, but I'm going to ignore it for a moment and fill in what I didn't get to last hour. If reading is so important, the big issue is access to books. That has to come first. And that's part of an even bigger issue, poverty. That's the elephant in the living room that everybody ignores. Kids who grew up middle class, first language or second language, there's no achievement gap. The big achievement gap is the rich and the poor. That's what it is, and it swamps all other data. First language, second language, ethnicity, that's the big one. And that's something we can do something about next week. We can protect children from the effects of poverty. And there are three ways of doing it. Poverty means not having enough to eat, not having good nutrition. We can easily take care of that by expanding food programs in school. Poverty means lack of medical care. Children of poverty do not get the medical care that includes teeth, vision, all that stuff, access to nurses, school nurses, etc. We can take care of that immediately. And it also means lack of access to reading materials. Children of poverty have practically no access to reading materials. The reason they don't do well in reading, they have nothing to read. They don't have it at home, they don't have it in their schools, they don't live in areas with lots of libraries and bookstores. I want to tell you about a study, this is on the handout from before, that I participated in that I think is the most important study I have been connected with. I did this with my former students who were my students in the 90s. Is that neat? And we're still hanging together doing research. Cian Lee from Taiwan and Jeff McQuillan from California. We did, of course, the whole thing virtually. There's this big test that comes out, all these big standardized international tests. This one's called the PEARLS. It's given to 10-year-olds in over 40 countries in the world in a test in their own language, like the PISA, but for younger kids. Well, when it comes out, the newspapers just love it. They want to know who won. Did France beat Germany? Did Japan beat Korea? And all this stuff. In fact, Alfie Kohn, whom I greatly admire, says the scores should be reported in the sports section of the newspaper. We ignored all that. We looked at the factors that predicted high scores on the PEARLS test. The biggest one, poverty. No question. Every study has found this, done in the last 30 years. We also looked at the impact of having access to a school library of at least 500 books, strong and positive. In fact, it nearly balanced the effect of poverty. I'm pausing. That's a big deal, what I just said. Providing access to books in a school library can nearly offset the impact of poverty on reading development. We did a replication. It didn't turn out quite as strong, but it was pretty good. Having access to a library can make up for a great deal of it. The effect of formal instruction, which means phonics instruction mostly, in our first study had 0 effect, and our second study had a negative effect. It's access to books that count. Phonics helps, but you don't need that much of it. Follow Michael Rosen in The Guardian. He's right, okay? Well, so that's what we're going to do. We're going to provide access to books. It's got to be the first thing. I'm very proud of a letter to the editor I just got published in Education Week. It basically said, and I piggybacked on the work of Susan Ohanian and rephrased what she said 10 years ago. We just passed a new law in education called Every Child Succeeds. And it's all about instruction and testing and all that. And I wrote and said, before we talk about every child succeeds, let's have every child has access to a good diet, every child has medical care, and no child is left homeless. Let's do that first, then we can talk about the rest. Okay, let's change topics. Writing, what about writing? I've talked about reading, what about writing? Writing does not cause language acquisition. It doesn't cause literacy development. If you increase writing, you do not increase literacy development, you don't even increase writing quality. Writing is output. We acquire language through input. I quote one study you can look at because it's in our free journal. It's by Rahim Saadi, one of my colleagues in Turkey we've been working with. Writing does something else. It has nothing to do with literacy development. Some of you are writing right now. The odds are good that no one else is going to read what you're now writing, probably not even you. But writing helps. Writing takes ideas that are vague, that are abstract. You put them down on the page, they become concrete. Writing helps thinking. Writing helps problem solving. Writing makes you smarter. There's academic work that shows this. The best evidence I know comes from a woman named Ann Landers. Ann Landers was an advice columnist for several major American newspapers. People would write in with their problems and she would give them answers. This is a letter written to Ann Landers in 1982. And it goes like this. Dear Ann, should I marry the guy or not? Let me tell you what the problems are. He's 32, he behaves as if he were 14. He can't hold a job, he's borrowed money from me 3 times in the last year. My parents don't like him. And he's jealous. When he brings me home after a date, he then calls me up again 20 minutes later. He says as to say a final goodnight. I know he's checking up, he's jealous. He thinks I'm going out with someone else. One night I was in the shower, I didn't hear the phone. I got up the next morning at 6:30, he was asleep on the front porch. Now the good thing is, he's very good looking. I find him physically attractive. That's about all. I've been sitting here for 10 minutes with pen in hand, and I can't think of anything good to say about him. Don't bother answering this letter. You've helped me more than you can imagine. Isn't that true? You have a personal problem. You write it down. Guaranteed 10% of the problem goes away on the spot. Isn't that true? You think sometimes the whole thing goes away, and this is a good example. Well, the field of language arts has had, I think, a major victory, a major triumph in work beginning in the 1970s called the composing process. You know about this. The composing process, it's very good stuff. It's wonderful work. It's strategies that good writers use to solve problems and avoid writer's block. I want to talk about the components of the composing process, what I call the classical composing process, and I'm in favor of it. It's helped me. I like talking about this because it's helped me a great deal as a writer. And then I want to add a couple of components to it. And I'm going through the handout as you had. The classical composing process has 4 elements. The first one, revision. Good writers know that as they go from draft to draft, they come up with better ideas. Average writers don't know this. They think, and poor writers, they think that all their ideas are in their first draft. And for them, revision is making a neater version of the first draft. They don't understand what Peter Elbow said so well. In writing, meaning is not what you start out with, but what you end up with. Isn't that beautiful? As you go from draft to draft, you come up with better ideas. Famous writers, Neil Simon, prolific playwright, all his plays are good, all of them. Some are fantastic. He was interviewed and he said, 99% of my time is revision. He said, mediocre writers write, good writers rewrite. That's where it happens. Kurt Vonnegut is a never-ending source of wisdom on just about everything. Here's my favorite Vonnegut quote on this. Novelists have, on the average, about the same IQ as the cosmetic consultant at the big department stores. Our power's patience. We have discovered that writing allows even a stupid person to seem halfway intelligent. If only that person will write the same thought over and over again, improving it just a little bit each time. It's a lot like inflating a blimp with a bicycle pump. Anybody can do it. All it takes is time. True or not true? Absolutely true. Having read all this stuff, the research on revision and what these great writers have said, I am now so psychologically healthy that when I have to revise, I'm happy because it means I'm learning something new. Every time I change things, I may learn something new. It takes time, though. You have to go through it again and again. I might revise something over and over, and it'll take weeks and months. I get these requests to contribute from journals and sometimes newsletters like, Professor Krashen, can you give us a couple of pages for our newsletter about technology and writing? I say, okay, fine, happy to. What's the deadline? 2 weeks. Can't do it in 2 weeks. Okay, 6 weeks. Can't do it in 6 weeks. Well, when can you have it? I said, I don't know. It depends. But you write so much. It comes so easily for you. I say, no, it doesn't. I just put in more time than you do, and it takes a long time. Things that come out now, they've been cooking for a long, long time. They say, okay, tell you what, take your time. You're Mr. Big Shot, all that. Whenever you're ready. When they take the pressure off, sometimes I'm done in 4 days. Because then you can focus on what you're doing. You have to eliminate the time pressure and be prepared to revise again, again, and again. So revision, I think, is the big one. Number 2, another big one, planning, but flexible planning. Have an outline. Have a map. No question. Don't just start writing. Poor writers just start writing and they wind up someplace completely different. So have an outline, have a map. This is quite important. Some people, what Janet Emig discovered in the 70s is that good writers have maps, have plans, but they do it in different ways. Some people use the regular handbook, Warner's handbook way, Roman numeral this, that. I like doing that. Some people use circles, lines, doesn't matter. The crucial thing, be prepared to change your plan. Here's why. If you start writing, writing makes you smarter. You're going to have better ideas. Your outline is going to change. Peter Elbow, who has helped me so much, says, be prepared to revise your outline and do it regularly, even if you think you don't need to. You'll discover new things. Every minute spent outlining is worth hours of writing. I was on this airplane going to Korea for a conference, and I was sitting next to this guy. You never know on an airplane. He looked like he was on his way to a convention of chainsaw massacres. You know, he had the tattoos and all that. And I put on my best macho posture, you know, how you doing there? Oh, pretty good, dude, how are you? You know, and eventually fell asleep and started talking in his sleep. What he said talking in his sleep was enough to have him arrested, I thought. Then he fell asleep on my shoulder. No. So I got up and I went to that part of the plane where they have the refreshments, which they do on the long flights. And I set up my computer. I had my paper all ready for this conference, and I rewrote it. I re-outlined it, just for fun. You tend not to want to do that because I don't want to have to rewrite it. I don't have time, you know, deadline. But I did it. I found so many new things. I thought it was finished. It was a significant couple of hours of real intellectual progress, just reconsidering, redoing. So outlining is right, it's good. Planning, be prepared to change your plans. Number 3, reread. Great writers do this. I have a couple of quotes here from people who do it. Rereading is a great idea. Hemingway, I rise at first light and start by rereading and editing everything I've written to the point I left off. Jonathan Kellerman, I reread to segue into new material. Rereading is great. It's a great way of avoiding writer's block. One of the main reasons of writer's block, I think, is that we lose our place. We don't know what we're doing. We don't want to sit down because we don't remember where we were. If you reread, you'll see where you were and you'll come up with more ideas. Again, we're always in a hurry because of deadlines. We've got to get done. Rereading is a shortcut. It pays off. Number 4 is a universal. Everybody recommends it, and it's a good idea. I like it too. Delay editing. Here's several reasons for doing it. The editing part of the composing process is good. This is where you clean up your punctuation, grammar, spelling, make sure you can see where you have to look things up, etc. Some of the rules you know, make sure it's right and it looks clean. There are 2 reasons for delaying it. Number 1, if you're worried about grammar and spelling, you're not worried about your ideas. It disturbs your creative flow. So delay it. Also, the version you're writing now will not be your final version because you're going to change it and change it. You don't put on your makeup before you take your shower. You don't do the wrapping of the gift before you buy the present. I would never put on my makeup before my shower, okay? It doesn't make sense. Same thing. Elbow's advice. Let me see if I have it here. Oh yeah, this is good. Treat grammar as a matter of very late editorial correcting. Okay, pretend you're going to hire an editor. And the editor is going to do it all for you, and then of course you hire yourself. Well, what I've just done is give you a brief review of what is already known, the 4 components of the composing process. I think they're wonderful. I think they're good. I want to add a couple. The 5th one I want to add, I've called incubation. Ooh, I'm not supposed to write it on here. I'm supposed to write it on here. Oh, low tech. I've just destroyed the whole computer. Do you remember when you were 10 years old and you were in class and you were supposed to doing seat work and you were staring at the ceiling? Remember that? And the teacher said, "Is the answer on the ceiling?" Remember that? Yeah. Well, it turns out the smart aleck answer is yes, it's on the ceiling. There have been a lot of studies in the area of creativity. We got to look at these other fields. And they all talk about the importance of breaks. A certain kind of break stimulates creativity. It's called incubation. Graham Wallace was the first person to really talk about this. He wrote a book called The Art of Thought, which came out in 1923. And here's what he says. Problem solving often requires an interval free of conscious thought to allow the free working of the subconscious mind. He got this from Helmholtz, physicist. And here's the quote from Helmholtz. He says, if I get stuck in all directions, happy ideas come unexpectedly without effort, like an inspiration. They have never come to me when my mind was fatigued or when I was at my working table. They came particularly readily during the slow ascent of wooded hills on a sunny day. Eckhart Tolle's brilliant book called The Power of Now. All true artists, whether they know it or not, create from a place of no mind, from inner stillness. Even the great scientists have reported their creative breakthrough comes at a time of mental quietude. The one who has influenced me the most is Poincaré. Poincaré, a mathematician who lived about 100 years ago, his work was essential to Einstein and the theory of relativity, and a lot of people think that Poincaré deserves a Nobel Prize for it. By the way, Einstein never got the Nobel Prize for relativity. He got it for the photoelectric effect 30 years later because of all the politics, etc. But Poincaré was a big help, and Poincaré has an essay on creativity that has been republished in every collection I have ever seen on creativity. He says, I'm working along, and I come to a problem in my math. I get up and do something mindless, something mechanical. I put some wood on the fire. That's it. Come back, 10 seconds, 15 seconds, and you know, it really helps. Very often the problem, the log jam, has loosened up and I see better solutions. This guy has changed my life. I'm not afraid to tell you what I did in the hotel room last night and what I generally do in hotel rooms. I have very strange hotel behavior. Here's what happens, and it happened last night. As soon as you left me, here's what happened. As soon as I get into the hotel, she had a thing to, I for some reason, like a poltergeist comes over me. And within 10 minutes, all my stuff is spread out as if some evil force has gone through my suitcase and thrown things around. It's exactly like a poltergeist. My toothpaste is on top of the television set. My underwear is in the shower. It's a mess, and I have no idea how it happened. I spend the rest of the evening cleaning up. I don't want the room to be a mess when the person comes in to clean. You do that too? Yeah, okay. But I have a lot of work to do, so here's what I did. Last night I had a lot of stuff I had to do, catch up. I had worked like 16 hours on the plane and on the train. It still wasn't enough. I still had to answer all these emails and all this. Just like you, right? So I start to work. I wanted to work on a letter to the editor. I started to work, and I get stuck. I get writer's block every 2 minutes. My life is one big writer's block. Does that make you feel better? That's all it is. I get up, take the toothpaste from the TV set, and put it in the bathroom. That's all. Then I go back and work, another writer's block. I take the socks from the shower, put it away. I might take out one shirt from my suitcase and hang it up. My goal is not to unpack and clean up the room. My goal is to do my work. By the end of the evening, the room is reasonably clean and my work is done. I can take a 20-minute job of washing dishes and I can get it done in 2.5 hours. Because I bring the computer into the kitchen. I love doing the dishes. I start by doing my work, immediately a block. I wash 3 dishes and put away dry 2 that have been draining. And until, I have more than halfway done, then I reverse it. Put away 3, wash 2, etc. My conscious mind is not focused on the dishes. My conscious mind is focused on my work. This is how we can deal with the inauthentic labor that we have to do. I even did it this morning, getting dressed. I hate getting dressed. It was, it's what was today? Today was the day I brushed my teeth. I remember that. Every 3 weeks, whether I need to or not, okay? So I did that. And just the mechanics of getting dressed, I stop and work and do something else. And put away this, and then brush my teeth, and then I shave, take the shower, etc. Because it's just too boring to do all at once. True or not true? I just hate it. But I get some work done while I'm doing it, preparing for today's workshop, etc. Poincaré has been a big help. There's another person I should mention here, and that is the people who did the discovery of DNA, Crick and Watson. Watson wrote a book on this called DNA, which is a wonderful book. And he described how it first occurred to him, where it jumped into his mind, that the double helix had this strange kind of spiral shape, and that was the solution. And when he admitted this in public, it was considered borderline scandalous when it came out. This is scientists' idea of what is scandalous. He and his wife, he had been working on it, couldn't figure it out. He and his wife went to the movies. On the way, walking back to the parking lot to get their automobile, it suddenly popped into his head. A moment of relaxation. I have discovered with my work, and it's consistent with the work of these people, that the relaxation has to be something mechanical and mindless. You can't go from one creative project and alternate it with another creative project. That doesn't work for me, and they never mentioned this. It could be a short period of time. Some people talk about long breaks. Feynman, the physicist, sometimes says you put a project aside, come back to it months later, and you find that it worked its way out. Before you take the break, you have to have wrestled with the idea. This is not an idea of just take your time and have a good time and don't do your work. It means we need breaks. In school, we don't allow this. When you look at the ceiling, it's considered that you're not profitably busy doing your work. So we have to study the way the mind works. The next one, which has also helped me enormously, daily regular writing. I've looked at the work. I first got this idea before I looked at what writers did. I found the work of a professor from the State University of New York who did a series of experiments on this called Robert Boyce. His job, I don't know if he's retired, but his job was to work with junior faculty members at the university. He was a professor of counseling, and to help them with problems of promotion, tenure, and getting their work done. Now, being a junior professor is really stressful because you've got 6 years or so to get your portfolio together, then you submit it and you're given tenure or not. And if not, you sometimes never recover because you've lost your job and it's hard to get another one. So this is very stressful. He found, just looking at these people, that they divided themselves into two groups. One group did daily regular writing. They put aside 40 minutes a day, 2 hours a day, didn't matter, but they did it every day. Whether they were ready to write or not, they worked on their work. The other group were called binge writers. They said, I can only work when I have 5 hours of uninterrupted time. And the conditions need to be perfect. Traffic has to stop around my house. Airplanes have to be rerouted so I can work, okay? The daily regular writers all got their work done. They got their committee work done. They were never behind. They submitted papers. They all got tenure. None of the binge writers succeeded, ever. Fascinating. This is consistent with what writers tell us. Let me go down the list here. Roselle and Brown, novelist. These people don't know each other. Writing is a job, not a hobby. You've got to sit down and work, schedule your time, stick to it. Another one, Walker Percy, you've got to sit down, follow a schedule. Unless you do that, you won't ever do anything. Irving Wallace, who wrote a book called The Prize, wrote a book on how he wrote The Prize and co-authored a journal paper on how writers write. The vast majority of published authors keep some semblance of regular daily hours. They do it at different times. Michael Chabon's like me, works all night. Maya Angelou got up at 6 in the morning, rented a hotel room, and worked from about 6 till noon every single day. Some people kept time. Irving Wallace wrote for a certain amount of time every day. Same thing, you have a list of people who did that: Flaubert, Conrad, Huxley, Hemingway. Others counted pages. Stephen King, 10 pages a day, or 2,000 words. I fit into this page word count. I have a magic number of words that I stick to. It works for me. It may not work for anyone else. But when I'm on a project, which is all the time, it's 600 words a day. If I do less, I feel my life is not complete. If I do more, I get stale. So when I have a big project, I always do 600. It's done before I know it, okay? Now let's see why it works. This is the crucial part of this presentation. Why does it work? We'll get closer and closer to it. Stephen King. Don't wait for the muse. Your job is to make sure the muse knows where you're going to be every day from 9 till noon or 7 till 3. Susan Sontag comes a little closer. Any productive writer learns you can't wait for inspiration. That's the recipe for writer's block. Madeleine L'Engle nails it. Inspiration usually comes during work rather than before it. You have a writer's block, sit down and start writing. When you get stuck, take a 1-minute break or 10 seconds. That does it. Woody Allen, who has had a very strange career, as you know, early on, this is prophetic what he said. I wrote an essay that he wrote early in his career. He said he decided that he was going to do one screenplay every year, regardless of what happened in his personal life. And that has turned out to work for him. His work is excellent. If you work only 3-4 hours a day, you become quite productive. It's the steadiness that counts. Oh my. Well, this obviously works for me, and I have discovered that it works for my life outside of the university as well, outside of scholarship. I have another separate life, and I'm at a crucial moment with it right now. Living in California, it's a California law that if you're a citizen of California, you must be involved in show business. And you have to have a script. The police can stop you and say, "Where is your script?" Okay, I'm not really a waiter, I want to direct everybody you meet. And I have been involved in show business for the last 7 years. I've had 6 musicals performed, okay? No kidding. The last one that was performed, there were more people in the audience than on the stage, which I regard as very successful. Every year, I write a play for the synagogue. That's my job. It's called a Purim play, or as we say in Yiddish, a Purim spiel, and it's based on the book of Esther. It's about 20 minutes and supposed to be funny. And it's supposed to be based on some musical or something. One year we did Mamma Mia. That was great. Last year we did, of course, Frozen. You know the song? Yeah, you know all the songs. Every 7-year-old girl in the world knows these songs. You know, would you like to build a snowman? Our version of it. In Judaism, a group that gets together for prayers is called a minyan. So you need 10 people to do prayers. So our song was, "Would you like to join our minyan? Would you like to come and pray? We never see you anymore." So we do that. And every year I procrastinate. What are we going to do next year? What are we going to do next year? And I let it go. Then I let it go. Then I realize, let it go. Then I realized that I got to sit down and write. I think of Madeleine L'Engle, and it's happening right now. My procrastination is over. During break, I looked on my cell phone. There was a note from the director, the cantor of the synagogue. He and I do it together. He directs it. I read, "How's it going? I've got 2 months to get it done. I haven't been working on it. And I now realize tonight I'm going to work on it, even if it's 10 minutes. If I start doing it every day within we're doing The Wizard of Oz this year, okay? So that's a tough one because you need a lot of good songs. We may supplement it with other Judy Garland songs that we can get. Okay, so the daily regular writing helps. It keeps you from having a writer's block because you don't forget where you are. And once you start writing, you'll notice, this is for any creative project, you will notice that the world will be collaborating and conspiring to help you finish. You'll be blocked on an idea, creative idea. You'll overhear a conversation. Ah, that's what I needed. It'll always be on your subconscious. This is why it works. Getting over this business of starting to write in writer's block Daily regular writing does it, and people have complained about it. Flaubert says, I have the peculiarity of a camel. I find it difficult to stop once I get started and hard to start after I've been resting. Gore Vidal, I'm always reluctant to start work and reluctant to stop. If Charles Dickens missed a day of writing, he needed a week of hard slog to get back into the flow. Tonight is the first night for me to start the Purim play. I have got to start working on it. I don't want to start. I don't quite know what to do. I have some idea. I'm going to have Queen Esther as Dorothy, and she'll go back in time to the time of King Ahasuerus and find herself as Esther and go through, and her uncle will become Mordecai in the play and all that. But I've got to do the first scene, the second scene, then it'll work. I'll let you know how it turns out, okay? Okay, those are the secrets of writing, and I'm going to end this the same way I ended the last. If this is true, the implications for our programs are very different. We don't have to ever test writing. It's a waste of time. It's the hardest thing to test. It's the worst thing to test. It's hard to rate writing. It's hard to get people to do it, but it doesn't matter because it's the result of reading. Why bother? How do you teach writing? You cannot teach writing style. When we teach writing, we're giving students a tool they can use for the rest of their lives to solve problems and make themselves smarter. And you can do it in any language. If you do it in the primary language, you don't have to do it all over again in English. You only need to do it once. So I think this makes our life much, much easier. Thanks very much for your attention. It's been a pleasure.